need for affordable housing. During a pandemic, the need to isolate safely is critical. Yet COVID-19 has exposed inequalities. Those who are marginalized do not have the luxury of safely isolating indoors, so tented encampments have popped up in Toronto, including in my community. To address this quickly, we've launched the Rapid Housing Initiative. It's a $1 billion program that will quickly build 3,000 new permanent, affordable housing units with $203 million dedicated to Toronto alone. Importantly, the RHI is targeted at the most vulnerable, people experiencing or at risk of homelessness. The program will rapidly develop new modular housing, convert non-residential buildings, and rehabilitate buildings that are abandoned or in disrepair. Personally, I've already commenced the work to ensure that the RHI will include saving and expanding rooming houses in Parkdale I Park, which helps so many in my community to stay safely housed. Mr. Speaker, housing is a basic human right. Each of us deserves a safe and affordable place to call home. Merci.
The Honourable Member for Cloverdale Langley City.
On August 24th, Professor Adoran wrote in Maclean's that the Liberals were dithering on vaccine procurement. He predicted that the vaccine would be coming to Canada a month late. 2 days later, I attended a Zoom meeting hosted by the Liberal member for Guelph for afternoon tea and spirits and a conversation with their COVID-19 experts. Panelists included Ashley Toot, Jeanette Como, Doug Manuel, top of the field. What a better opportunity for me to find out if the professor was right. I asked the moderator, Tara Bingham from AstraZeneca, a pointed question. Has Canada pre-purchased any vaccine doses for Canadians from your company? She hesitated and then replied, I'm not a panelist, so I'll call you later. My heart sank. No answer said it all. The Liberals knew that Canada was at the back of the line 3 months ago. The Prime Minister says we won't get a vaccine in December like everyone else because we have no manufacturing capacity. Utter nonsense. Canadians won't get a vaccine anytime soon because he failed Canadians again.
The Honourable Member for Oshawa.
Mr. Speaker, this week is victims and survivors.
I just want to point something out. If the Honourable Member can lower the boom, we'll be able to hear his whole statement. Thank you.
I'll finally get it right, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much. This week is Victims and Survivors of Crime Week. The Conservative Party has always stood for the rights of victims, highlighted by the passing of the Victims' Bill of Rights during our time in government. My advocacy on this issue has been inspired by my constituent Lisa Freeman, whose father was murdered in 1991. This current government has continually failed to address the concerns of victims, especially during COVID-19. Repeatedly, victims' rights advocates have had to push the government to ensure victims and their families are included in the parole board process. All victims and their families are asking for, Mr. Speaker, is not to be re-victimized by the system that's supposed to protect them, while luxuries such as
Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
Mr. Speaker, from 1932 to 1933, the world witnessed one of the worst atrocities ever committed. Over the course of 15 months, several million Ukrainians were slowly starved to death by communist dictator Joseph Stalin and his brutal regime in what is known as the Holodomor. Ukrainians who were living on some of the most fertile lands in Europe were robbed of all their food by Stalin and his thugs. This included their garden produce, livestock, poultry, and their crops. In one sadistic policy, the Soviets weaponized food and created a man-made famine. And what was their crime? They were Ukrainian patriots, proud of their language, culture, and faith. Stalin said, the death of one person is a tragedy, but the death of a million is a statistic. We must never allow Stalin's sad words to ring true. This Saturday, on National Holodomor Memorial Day, we remember every man, woman, and child who perished in the Holodomor and honor the survivors of this genocide. Vichnaya Pamyat, may their memories be eternal.
The brain is only a receiver. In the universe, there is a core from which we obtain knowledge, strength, and inspiration. Nikola Tesla.
Inspiration they provide, because when the world seems hard, these leaders remind their troops that the opportunities are endless.
Oral questions. Question orale, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister couldn't answer whether the government negotiated the right to manufacture vaccines here in Canada. At committee, the head of the Public Health Agency suggested the government did not do that. So let's try this one more time, Mr. Speaker. Did the government negotiate the right to manufacture vaccines here in Canada? Yes or no?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And when this pandemic began, we all know that Canada had no biomanufacturing capacity suitable for a COVID-19 vaccine. Underinvestment in vaccine production capacity began decades ago, in the previous century. And we realized right away that we had to invest in our flexible domestic production. We had to ramp up our facilities, which is exactly what we did. But rest assured that when a vaccine is ready and approved, we will be one of the first countries to get those doses from the manufacturers of Canada's vaccine portfolio.
Well, Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, you know there's no plan when the Minister of Health is here and not answering questions on a pandemic, Mr. Speaker. It's rubbish. In fact, rubbish was the word one of the experts used to provide on the government's answer to vaccine manufacturing. The National Research Council has a facility in Montreal that could manufacture millions of vaccines. We know that most of the world will receive the vaccine before Canadians do. Why did the Prime Minister negotiate deals to put Canada at the back of the line for COVID-19 vaccines?
Before we go to the Minister of Health, order. Before we go to the Minister of Health, I want to remind the honourable members that we are not to state whether someone is present or not. It's just part of the rules, and I am here to enforce them. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I think the member opposite it fails to understand that, in fact, Canada is the best country positioned with the most doses of vaccine per capita anywhere else in the world. In fact, we have 7 leading candidates that we have procured, Mr. Speaker, 3 of them under regulatory review. In fact, you know what, Mr. Speaker, we're the only country that is reviewing all 3 leading candidates right now as we speak. In fact, Moderna, if he won't listen to me, how about the president of Moderna, who said Canada is certainly one of the first countries to have an agreement with us and will be serviced very quickly.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the robust portfolio they talk about ensures that Canadians will have the most vaccines in 2023, Mr. Speaker. Last night, the Minister for Intergovernmental Affairs gave 3 answers to the same question about when vaccines would be arriving. First, it was January. Then he said sometime in 2021. Then it was the first quarter, Mr. Speaker. In one interview, Canadians saw that the Liberal government has no plan when it comes to a vaccine rollout for Canadians. The question to the Minister is simple. On what exact date will the vaccine for Canadians be here?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite is trying to confuse Canadians right now as we speak. In fact, what we know here on this side of the House is that we have worked incredibly hard as a government to procure 7 leading vaccines, Mr. Speaker, more per capita than any other country in the world. In fact, Mr. Speaker, 3 of them under regulatory review right now, the only country in the world to have those 3 simultaneously reviewed. I have to say, Mr. Speaker, the future looks bright for Canadians. I am proud of the work of my colleagues to make this happen.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Monsieur le Président, des milliers.
Mr. Speaker, thousands of businesses have had to close their doors during the pandemic. Many Canadians have lost their jobs. When we heard the good news about a vaccine, Canadians saw a glimmer of hope once again. But this government has no plan for the vaccine, and we're the last in line to receive the vaccines. My question is simple. When will Canadians be getting these vaccines? The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canada is one of the best countries positioned to receive the most doses per capita than any other country in the world. In fact, Mr. Speaker, 3 of the leading candidates under regulatory review right now, the only country in the world to be reviewing the 3 leading candidates. I have to say, Mr. Speaker, that when the president of Moderna, one of those 3 candidates, says Canada is certainly one of the first countries to have an agreement with us and will be serviced very quickly, that should give Canadians confidence that we're doing the job and we'll get it done.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
To review, last to receive, Mr. Speaker. That's the record of this government. Le 23 octobre, les ministres
On the 23rd of October, the Ontario and Quebec health ministers wrote a letter to the federal government. A letter about vaccine planning, and they didn't get an answer. We know that more than 2 billion people throughout the world will be getting their vaccines before we do. Why is Canada going to receive a vaccine after many other countries do? The Honourable Government House Leader, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition seems to be going fishing here, and I think he seems to be trying to lead Canadians astray. That is not appropriate. We know that Canada has agreements with 7 vaccine production companies, the best vaccine portfolio in the world, and the greatest number of doses, Mr. Speaker. We will be there when the vaccine... When the vaccines are ready, Canada will be ready. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
The Prime Minister blamed the Conservatives for the fact that Canada can no longer produce vaccines. Well, it's not a surprise for anyone that Conservatives let down Canadians when it came to healthcare. But what does the Prime Minister have to say about 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, and this year? Why is the Prime Minister making Canadians wait for a vaccine?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In contrast to the other side, our government has been aggressively pursuing new biomanufacturing capacity. We've taken serious action since well before the pandemic. In our first mandate, we restored the ability for ISED to invest in life sciences. That had been pulled back by the previous government. And we've only accelerated our investments significantly since the pandemic with major investments in our manufacturing capacity, Medicago, the National Research Centre in Montreal. We're on our way to building a beautiful portfolio of vaccines. It will be delivered when Health Canada says they're ready.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're in the middle of the second wave of COVID-19. People are scared. But vaccine announcements gave people a bit of hope. But now, this Liberal government has not shared a plan with Canadians. What is the plan for delivering the vaccines? When will we receive the vaccines? What is the plan? The Honourable Minister of Health.
Have the best portfolio in the world, more doses per capita than any other country. 3 of the leading vaccines under regulatory review, expedited, working in partnership with the Americans and the European Union so that we can share our data and approve those vaccines even more quickly. We have a plan, Mr. Speaker. We're working with provinces and territories at all levels. And let me remind the member opposite, they are actually experts at immunization. Every single year, they deploy immunization, as is their healthcare responsibilities. We'll be there to support them, including by providing the vaccines, Mr. Speaker.
The
Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, this government is creating a smokescreen with its white paper. For 5 years, the Liberals have been talking about reforming official languages. But now, when it's time to act, we see that they haven't done anything. They haven't prepared anything. What have they been doing for the last 5 years in this file? They're flying by the seat of their pants, Mr. Speaker. A motion was unanimously adopted that asked the minister to table a bill on modernizing the Official Languages Act. We want to know whether the minister will be respecting that motion. The Honourable Minister of Official Languages. Mr. Speaker, my colleague has asked what we've done over the last 5 years. Well, we repaired all the mistakes made in this file by the Harper government. That's what we've been doing. And when I look at the current Conservative strategy, they're clearly trying to steal votes from the Bloq. This is all about political maneuvering. It actually has very little to do with their real values on official languages, and it would never show itself in action. They would never take action on the file. Even the NDP, with the member for New Westminster Burnaby, recently stated that whenever the Conservatives are in government, Francophone rights are violated. The Honourable